Hi, this is Empire of the Mind. I'm Dr. Bruce Gilley. If contemporary anti-colonialism is most closely associated with the so-called Rhodes Must Fall movement that targets the various tributes to the former British colonialist Cecil Rhodes, then perhaps there is no better place to revisit the premises of anti-colonialism than in the colony founded by Rhodes in 1888 that bore his name as Rhodesia. Until the 1960s, Rhodesia was the breadbasket of southern Africa and a stable colony with a growing black middle class. But black nationalist movements prompted the white-led government of Ian Smith to declare unilateral independence from Britain in 1965. This led to a long and bloody civil war that ended with the termination of the Rhodesian experiment in multi-ethnic rule in favor of black majority rule as Zimbabwe in 1980. Under Robert Mugabe. Western progressives fought on the side of Mugabe, never worrying about the consequences of the overthrow of constitutional government or property rights. Mugabe began his rule with genocides against black minority tribes, and then proceeded to loot, plunder, and destroy the country. Living standards have fallen by an astounding 80% under black majority rule, and millions of Zimbabweans have fled to South Africa just to survive. While Western academics continue to coo and fawn over the so-called liberation struggle, actually existing Zimbabweans are starting to escape from the intellectual prison of anti-colonialism and to say the unsayable. One example is the social justice activist, writer, author, and political commentator Tendai Ruben Momofana. A friend of mine in Zimbabwe sent me your October 21st article in the Zimbabwean called At Times I Really Wish Zimbabwe Was a Colony Again, which ends with this very powerful statement where you say, please understand my frustration, but when was the last time this country had any semblance of a working system? Was it not during the colonial Rhodesian times? And then you say, can I be blamed then for looking back at those days and thinking, maybe we were better off as a colony? What's been the reaction to your article?
Well, as to be expected, it caused a bit of a stir. The people were divided, as to be expected, in a country as ours, where people are really polarized along political lines. So I did get my fair share of criticism, even anger at times, and say, "How dare you? You know, a black guy saying that you wish we were a colony again. You know, what's wrong with you? Are you okay upstairs?" I did have some who understood, and these were usually the older generation. You know, I have my mom, and she was born in 1938. She started working in 1964. So if you have such people around you, you know, that generation, that were adults during the Rhodesia, the colonial period, and then who worked also during the independent Zimbabwe period, they are more understanding. They're the ones who make those statements. You know, true, I was a kid. I was born only in 1973. So it means at independence, I was only 7 years old. So I don't have much of a remembrance of those days, but we have our parents. We have our grandparents and our uncles and everyone else. They are saying exactly the same thing. Maybe I was only bold enough, you know, to say those things out loud. But these are things that they're saying every day. My mom, her first salary in 1964, she was earning, I think it was 12 pounds, Rhodesian pounds. At that time, she would grumble and say, what are we supposed to buy with 12 pounds? And if she was a nurse, she was a general nurse, and she would also compare with their white counterparts, and apparently they'll get a bit more, you know, just a bit more than 12 pounds. But they complained, which led to some going to the liberation struggle to get this country freed, so to speak. But today, that 12 pounds that my mom earned in 1963, 64, 65, and the 70s, compared to what a nurse today, no matter how big sounding the figures could be, they'll tell you that I'm getting, but they're getting $200. Can you imagine in this day and age, a nurse, a teacher earning $200 a month? What can you buy with it? Although we're living in what they call townships in those days, maybe in the United States they'll call them ghettos and stuff like that, but we ate pretty. It was okay, bacon, eggs, bread, clothes, new clothes. Now and again, Christmas, we had new clothes. So today, a nurse cannot afford to do that. And I think today was a perfect example, actually. The electricity. Electricity would never go just like that, just because there are some drops of rain outside. There had to be something major, some major storms going on for electricity to go. But why it can just go, maybe even in the middle of this discussion, is because we are using old machines that were hardly maintained. They were installed some even during the Smith era, that was in 1960s. That is like Kariba hydroelectric dam. I'm sure, but when it was constructed by the Italians in the late 50s, early 60s, that is the same equipment we are using today. So this is the type of country that's where you start looking at how things are, that a teacher, a nurse is struggling to buy a loaf of bread. And these are things during Rhodesia you could buy straight. And here we are saying we are living in those former white suburbs. They should be having running water. They should be having electricity. We shouldn't be, those are things that we should not even be worrying about in a so-called independent country. But those are the things we are worried about every day. I was worried I wasn't going to make it for this very important discussion because there was no electricity.
The generation that remembers the Rhodesian era, maybe even the British colonial era before that, I mean, what are their memories?
We used to have tea and this. Remember those days we could easily just drive to the Luna Park or to the entertainment centers. We remember those days we could just go to the drive-in cinema, but now we can't. So from their memories, from those folks, especially who were working in Rhodesia, their memories now are fond memories.
Was it possible to have been slower to move towards independence?
Possible, no, it wasn't, because the pressure now was just too much. So I think the pressure now that was bearing on the Smith regime was just too much. So for him to then say, let's just delay it, that wasn't going to work. I think the only way it could have worked was if they had the understanding and the input of Mugabe and Komo at that time, the two leaders of the two nationalist movements. If they understood what the reasoning for the delay was, probably, but we are dealing with people who wouldn't see things that way. They were greedy for power. In fact, I'm reminded of a very interesting story. I don't know how plausible it is, but there was a friend of mine who was involved in some of these things just before independence, and they were saying even Mugabe's wife, just on the eve of independence, they met secretly with other wives of other nationalist leaders, or even Ian Smith's wife. I think she was there, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I've got my facts mixed up here and there, but she was actually warning the wife that this guy is the wrong guy to be the leader of this country. You are going to be in trouble. This guy is vindictive, he's power hungry, and he is out baying for blood.
What practical things can be learned from the colonial era today to help Zimbabwe to move forward?
What we can learn from the colonial era is unity of purpose. When the Rhodesians, when the sanctions were imposed on Rhodesia after the declaration of the Unilateral Declaration of Independence, UDI, they bound together. They had a common vision and said, all right, now we might not have access to this because of the embargo, but we are one people. Let's work together. It was not a partisan thing. It was not a Rhodesia front thing, a political party thing. It was Rhodesians as a collective, united. That's one thing that we lack in Zimbabwe. Everything has to be linked to one party. In Zimbabwe, if you are to be labeled patriotic, what that means is you support ZANU-PF, the ruling party. If you do not support the ruling party, you do not agree with their policies, then somehow you are unpatriotic. So if we can get together and agree what is patriotism, patriotism is just simply the love of one's country. Even if we disagree, but we are one family, listen to the one who's not agreeing with you. Sit down, listen to them. Don't perceive them as enemies. Don't see them as a threat that needs to be exterminated or eliminated. No, we have one. So that's one thing we can learn from the Rhodesians. There was no corruption to talk about. Maybe people were corrupt. I don't think there's truly a 100% clean society. But honestly, if you're going to make it a point that this is your mission to loot the country, it's like that's what you live for. That's what you're planning every day, day, night. You are just planning how to plunder, how to loot. Honestly, how is the country going to survive? So there is so much looting. We go to the diamonds, to the platinum, every sector of our economy. But we didn't see that during Rhodesia. There were no reports of Smith plundering the economy and flying with $1 million chartered jets all over the place. No, we will put the country first. I remember writing an article saying we last saw true democracy and a smooth transfer of power during Rhodesia. And it's so ironical. Although those were white parties, but they were democratic amongst themselves. They never killed each other. They never imprisoned each other on some spurious charges. They had democratic elections amongst themselves, and they would just so easily change power, changing hands. But in Zimbabwe, we don't do that. So as long as we don't have that democracy and say, okay, we are calling ourselves an independent democratic state, and yet there is no democracy. What can we learn from the Rhodesians? How were they doing it amongst themselves? Even if we say as black people, we were not included as such. But as white people, what were they doing? How were they doing their politics? Were they shooting each other, burning each other's houses, marching in the streets and beating opposition supporters? No, we didn't see that. So why can't we copy that? Why can't we do it on our own now and say, no, we are now independent. We know what democracy is. I see these leaders wanting to preach to the United States, to the United Kingdom, saying, don't teach us about democracy because we are the ones who fought for democracy. But there is no democracy to talk about. If they are serious that they fought for democracy and we shouldn't be lectured by anyone about democracy, then show it, prove it.
Chinua Achebe's last book, which was about mainly about the Biafra War, and he said, but he had a lot to say about the British colonial period. And what he said was the main difference between the colonial period and the post-colonial period in Nigeria was during the colonial days we had a meritocracy.
He was spot on. He was absolutely right. That's the only way forward. Appoint the people who deserve to be there, who are qualified to be there, we are competent to be there. That we don't see that. We haven't seen that in the past 41 years. We just appoint people because of their patronage. How close are you to the president? How loud are you in your praise singing, hero worshipping of the leader? You are the son of God, you are the chosen one, and so forth. Then you get a post. And all you can do, because you're clueless, you don't know what you're supposed to do actually, because you're not competent. So what else can you do? You steal. An idle mind is the devil's workshop. So they say you just spend your day looting because you don't even know what you're supposed to do. Even if you wanted to do it, you cannot because you don't know how to do it. So I love that point and say, no, let's base our appointments on people who are competent, who know what to do.
Thank you so much for this. I know that all of the viewers will really join me in thanking you for your heroism and outspoken talk, and wishing everyone in Zimbabwe the best.
Thank you so much, Bruce. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And all your viewers, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this. I hope it helped a bit to better understand our situation in Zimbabwe.